So this is action number 10, and we're on the framework for understanding poverty. And of course, you all have been with us before, you know, Brana and I'm Bernadette. But we need to teach the children how to ask questions, and that's so they can get past the third grade reading level. And so they can get inside their heads and know what they know and what they don't know. And Kim does such a wonderful job with teaching kids how to ask questions, teaching teachers how to teach children how to ask questions. And if if you allow them to come up with their own questions, they're going to learn so much more. And you guide them, but you have to also allow them that opportunity and teach them how.
It takes me back to the training we had where we have to give the kids a reason, a need to know. Why do you need to know
Mhm.
this? And then they can ask questions. What do I need to do? How am I going to improve my reading? I mean, they really need to, we really need to teach them to set goals and ask questions that will increase their learning. You know, it's not like, let's not keep them in the dark about what they know and what they need to know.
And then help them to guide them through that, help them to understand what they need to do to get there, you know, what questions they might need to ask, because sometimes they have a hard time coming up with questions until you teach them how to ask questions.
Mhm.
And like I said, Kim's one of the best I know with that. She's great.
Kim, you are wonderful. And Mary, we can't live without
And
Mary.
Mary.
Okay.
And it talks about how you can do this by practicing question writing. If a student says, I don't understand, and you ask, which part don't you understand? And the student says, all of it. Or none of it, the student probably doesn't know how to ask questions
Right.
syntactically. So to do this, any task, one must be able to go inside the head and ask questions. If individuals cannot, then they cannot examine any behavior, nor can they retrieve information in a systematic way. And you know how yourself, when you're thinking about something, I know I do this all the time. I'll start thinking and asking those questions, and I can almost see it in my head because I've worked through it.
Yeah,
So
I can see it in your head too.
well, good.
That was
Glad of
just a
that.
that was just a joke. But yeah, and it says, if you can't ask questions, you don't know what you know, or you don't know what you don't know if you can't ask a question. You have to be able to ask the right questions to get the knowledge that you need. And that's like when we're talking about behavior. If kids don't know, they don't usually know what's causing the behavior. So that's when we have to ask them questions, and then they have to reflect too. And I always go back to that, like a debriefing form. What were you doing before the incident? What were you doing during, what were you thinking? So
True.
writing multiple choice questions. 3 rules: one wrong answer, choice must be funny. So that's a good one. You can get that's a give me. Only one answer, one choice can be right, and not to use all of the above or none of the above. So have students write a multiple choice question using one of the stems, one of these 3 stems. One wrong answer must be funny, one answer choice must be right, and they can't have the none of the above or all of the above. Begin by having students write their questions, and then debrief them about how their questions are written. Question making is developmental, you know. Uh, but if by the end of 2nd grade, students still cannot ask questions, it will probably impact their reading. And if a child cannot ask a question, then the students likely will not get past the 3rd grade reading level. That's something to think about. Sometimes in poverty, when a child asks questions, he or she might be reprimanded. And this is talking about, uh, I mean, in generational poverty, it would be like, stop asking so many questions. And I've heard parents say they're, when their kids start talking, that's just question like why, but why, uh, those kinds of questions that kids have. But in poverty, where the kid is not allowed and they don't have that support system or the resources, and the parents don't have the resources to pull that out of them or let them ask questions, then that might not be very developed when they come to school. So in second grade, just use two answers, one wrong, one right. Teach them how to write those kinds of questions, multiple choice questions. And if twice in a week, instead of having students answer the questions at the end of the chapter, and surely we're not going to do that again, but well, I'm not even going to go down that road, but Kim might. You have them write the questions, or they can read a passage and write their own questions, you know. Um, Kim, I want you to jump in here and give me an Arwen story about asking questions. I know when she was little, she had to ask a lot of questions.
Um, well, I mean, she did, and I can't think of one off the top of my head. But one thing, with me is that I was insatiable,
Mm-hmm.
and gosh, this is being recorded. Don't worry, and I know you say that. Mary's like, oh gosh, but when I was little, I was following my mom around the house one day, and this is a famous story in our family. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in one of my questioning moods, and I kept asking her where I came from. Like it was a Saturday, and she was cleaning house,
Yeah.
and I kept following her around. And she said she knows I wasn't 3, but anyway, one of my favorite things to do, and you all know this here at KVEC, like when I was little, my first heroes were preachers. I love
Yeah.
going to church. I loved hearing sermons and stuff. And I wanted to be a preacher when I was like 3 years old, and I would line my Barbies up and stuff. So anyway, but mom says I kept following it. And so, and asked her that. And so finally, she just couldn't take it anymore. And it was about the 12th time I'd asked her that day. She said, I found you under a rock. So she screamed it at me and walked off. Okay. Well, that evening when we sat down for dinner, and, I always said the prayer. And so I said the prayer. And at the end of the prayer, and I said, thank you, God, for letting mom find me under a rock. And my mom said she felt this big. So she was like, and then everybody at the table went, yes, thank you, Lord. So, but yeah, I was one of those kids that just, I mean, and to the point, even as an adult, when I would go to the doctor with my mom and I would ask a lot of questions, she looked at me, she goes, she's always done this. Just hurry and answer it so we can go on.
And I think
Oh,
Bernadette, I think Laura Lee just had the look on her face, the quizzical look, and Bern knew a question was soon to follow.
yeah. Why?
Why?
But why? I don't understand that. So sometimes I'd be like, I don't know. But I will say this about this. If you let them write their own questions from the chapter, I mean, don't you think they're really going to learn so much more from that
Yeah,
than just
yeah.
trying to go back and find the answer to a question you've given them? Because they're going to be digging through it and picking out their
Well,
questions.
they
So,
actually have to read it,
Mhm.
you know.
I,
mhm.
I used to let my kids develop questions for the test,
Mm-hmm.
and they would turn them in as part of one of the assignments. Maybe this is what you were looking for, but anyway, and they would write their questions, and I would take them up, and they had to do like 5 multiple choice, 2 true and false. This was the old days.
Yeah.
But anyway, I always told the kids that if your question's good enough to make it to the test, and I don't use one of my questions, or I take one of their questions and touch it up a little bit, then those two, that partner, those 2 kids, because I always had them do it in pairs, then they got extra points on the test. And that always
Mm.
kind of motivated them to do like a little bit
Mhm.
better. Now sometimes they
Yeah.
would write them too hard, and I told them, I said, and sometimes kids would ask me, I said, you wrote it too hard. There was no
Mhm.
possibility of answering it, kind of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's
good.
good, Kim.
It's a
That's
very
good.
good idea.
Uh, okay. I didn't have time to ask Mary about Sarah. I bet she was very quizzical too. Math questions, stems, distractors are incorrect operation, incorrect order, decimal in the wrong place, answer in the wrong form, missed step, unnecessary information included, and computational errors. And, and I'm not sure.
And it talks about how it's so important to use that terminology, the
Yeah.
correct
Yeah.
terminology.
Yeah. Cause, when you start kids out in kindergarten, you say plus, uh, you know, takeaway. You don't want to do that you want to use the correct vocabulary and terminology with math. Okay. Throwing this in there.
Questions require levels of thinking and different skills to respond. As questions are taught to the learner, it is important to look at the question stem. And you can see right here that it has it broken down by Bloom's taxonomy, process verbs, assessments, and questioning strategies. So if you're teaching them at the applying level, here's the definition, here's the process verbs, here are the assessments, and here are the question stems. It gives you some starters for each one of those levels. What is it that you're actually asking them to do? You have to teach the key verbs, and those can unlock the mystery of the question stem and allow the learner to process the information in a manner that is directly related to the action needed. Question stems are critical to understand in the area of assessment. So if you don't have that question set up correctly, then you're probably not going to get what you're looking for from it. If they don't know the meanings of those words, those verbs, if they don't understand those, then they're not going to be able to answer the question correctly. Can we change it to the next one, or do you have something to add?
I was just going to ask, I think when you look at this, so basically in emotional poverty, is it talking about like, not the emotional part, but understanding poverty, is that they go through and so if you're going to be using these questions and that kind of thing, I can see, creating like a bookmark for the kids so they can see those questions, all of those question stems and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I could really, and it's one of those bookmarks even that you would just like tape onto the desk. So they have those there, right. and even teaching them to use those stems to ask their own questions.
Yeah. And I always like a word wall too.
And if you look here, it has some really good questions to follow. If anybody's having trouble, and as Kim said, you can teach your kids also to use these to ask the questions. I think that's a really good idea. Help them to develop their own questions.
And when you're talking about kids coming from generational poverty, more than likely they're not going to have the vocabulary, but they're not going to know. And we talked about the percentages of words that they know when they come to school, and they're not going to have they may not have the ability to ask those higher level questions. Okay, Vern, I can't. Can you see that?
Can I see it?
Yeah, go ahead.
It just takes it on down through Bloom's taxonomy. You're going into the creating, evaluating, and you want to get to the analyzing. So breaking information, it talks about the definition of what each one of those are. It also has the process verbs and the assessments that are good for that. Like on the assessments, it says, like when you're using the analyzing, you can use a chart, checklist, database, diagram, graph. It gives you a whole list of things that are appropriate, and then the questions. So, and we can share these with you, and I'm sure you've seen them before, but kids may not know what categorize means, for instance. Well, you can't write questions with that word in it if they don't know what that means, because you're not going to get the right answer. They're not going to be able to write questions correctly unless they understand those process verbs and the assessments that can be used along with it.
Good. Okay, I'm going, Vern. I'm going. Questions for quality thinking. Remember, identification and recall of information: who, what, when, where, and how, and describe. And that was one of the big things on the assessments when the assessment started, that kids had to, they had to know these words: describe, explain, when assessment started. Understand, organization and selection of facts and ideas. Retell in your own words how a kid can retell a story in their own words and what is the main idea of the story. Use of facts, rules, and principles. Apply how is an example of what. How is this related to this, related to that? And how does this compare or contrast with? And that's a big thing, compare and contrast. And that's one of Marzano's 10 strategies. I think there was 9 famous ones. I think there's 10 now, but that is one of them. So, and you get higher
order thinking, you know.
Well, you get a better it's a large, I want to say it makes you get a lot of points. You know what I'm saying? Well, I know what I'm saying, but I
Well,
can't say
it's
it.
kind of like a lot of bang for your buck.
Yeah, that's
You
it.
know,
That's
when
it.
you're comparing some of the other strategies, some of them may not
Get you as much of
require
a gain.
kids to think. That's right.
Yeah.
To get that gain.
Analyze separation of the whole into component parts. What are the parts or features of? Classify according to. How does this compare or contrast with? Create a combination of ideas to form a new whole. What would you predict or infer from? And what ideas would you add to? And how would you create or design a new? And what would happen if you combined blank and blank? And those are really good quality
Those
thinking.
are some questions that you can use to get quality thinking.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
when you're looking at trying to teach kids how to ask questions, well, you model that by how you ask questions also, because they learn from you.
And learning the words, the vocabulary words that go with them. Evaluation. Evaluate developmental of opinions, judgments, or decisions. Do you agree with? What do you think about? What is the most important? Prioritize according to. How would you decide about? And what criteria would you use to assess? And you can use these questions with young kids too. You might, you can break them down like prioritize according to. Prioritize your hobbies according to the most favorite, on a scale of 1 to 10, those things.
And I think these are great, just like discussion questions in general, because I think sometimes with your kids, the generational poverty and that kind of stuff, they may not have the exact words, but they're at least going to have the thinking, and you're going to build that up. So if you ask these orally and use them for discussion and stuff like that, I think that would be great.
Absolutely.
I agree, Kim. And I've watched Kim actually teach teachers, like I said, they come up with the questions on what they're doing. So therefore they learn how to use that with the students. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because that was something I struggled with when I was in the classroom, was getting kids to ask the right questions, quality questions. And I've seen a lot of other teachers struggle with that. So I think that's just really important. And she's very good at that if anybody ever wants to see her or hear from her.
She's
coming there for you, Kim.
She's coming to a city near you.
Oh.
But I mean, back when I taught, it was so long ago that, we asked the questions and we did, and the kids were supposed to do the thinking or the it wasn't deep learning like it could be today. And I'm talking about early 80s, so, but you learn, you
back
learn
in the day before some of you all were born.
That cut like a knife.
Just saying. Well, I'm older than you, so.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Readings and actions. Oh, these are just some readings that you can take a little picture of it. Working with parents, building relationships for student success. And even when families are in generational poverty, you can work with them. And I think once you build relationships with those, with the people in poverty or those families, um, it makes a big difference toward the student's success in school. And we
It
know
does, because
that.
if you're working together, that makes
Mhm.
all the difference.
And
If they realize you're not telling them what to do, you're working with them. It's all in how
Yeah.
you approach them many times.
Yeah, and I always said, you parents, you know, to be involved in your kids' education, it's not that you do all these activities and all these things at the school and do all that, which that's all great. But it's maybe you make sure that little Tommy has his homework finished, or that he gets to school on time, or that he comes to school every day. Those are good things that parents can be, and I call that involvement myself.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Okay, the 10 actions, and we've talked about all these: build relationships and mutual respect, and we just talked about that right then. Teach students the hit. Okay, Shelley, she's back in. Hi, Shelley. Teach students the hidden rules of the school, and we're talking about the schools. Uh, they operate on the middle class rules. Okay. Analyze the resources of your students and make interventions based on resources the students have access to. And we talked a lot about that. A lot of our students that live in generational poverty do not have resources, do not have supports that kids in middle class do. Teach formal register, the language of school and work. Teach mental models. Like Bernadette said, if you can see it in your head, then, so teach abstract processes. And we talked about how kids in generational poverty, it's hard for them to see anything abstract. It's concrete things that they can, things that they can see. Teach students how to plan. And I think that's a big thing, teaching kids how to plan. And
Mm-hmm.
Vern talked about this the other day, planning from the end back to the beginning. Use the adult voice and reframing to change behaviors. We talked about this, when kids use their kid's voice, we can't use a kid voice too. We have to stay in the adult voice. And a lot of times teachers might get caught up in that, back and forth with kids, so that's not going to work. You have to stay in the adult voice. Understand the family resource and dynamics. And we talked about the family structure, and the family function. A lot of the family structures and functions change now, and sometimes they change monthly. You know, um, you may have Daddy Joe there today, but he may not be there next
Mm-hmm.
month, or you may have other family members coming in to live with you. So the structure and the structure can change quite frequently, and the function is who's in charge of the family. Who is the mother in charge? Does she make the rules? Do they? We did talk about that other, and then what we just talked about right then: teach students how to ask questions.
Now, think about these and think about what you already do. I'm sure you already do many of these things. And which ones of these will you add? What are some things that you've learned that you think you will add and in order to meet the needs of those kids? And we do have something in the chat. Thank you, Adrian. I think workshops for parents would be helpful. For example, giving them resources to use with their kids' vocabulary, how to respond to kids when they ask questions, and so forth. Absolutely. And that would be such a great parent activity to do. And, even you could do it virtually if nothing else. And most of them do have internet. Everybody doesn't, but you could also do them in person because it builds that relationship. I know we do a lot of things virtually and I like it, and I know it's very handy. Sometimes it's good to put that face with the person. But you're absolutely right. And, I had somebody that did a grant several years ago, and one thing they did was they fixed little boxes for each parent to send home. They met with the parents. They showed them how to use the tools in there, and each kid had their own box that they sent home, and the parent would work with them. And sometimes, I had a parent one time, and she called and she said, I need to come in. I don't know how to do this math with them. And it was a low socioeconomic. And I said, hey, come right on. The teacher will be here this afternoon and work with you on that. And, but we had worked with that parent for a long time to build up that relationship to where they felt comfortable enough to call and say, I don't understand. And,
Yeah.
it's okay that we don't know everything, and we need to let them know that that's okay. That's like us. If we don't teach something for a long time, then we have to refresh before we can ever teach it. We have to get some help, and they need to understand that, we're working together. So, just kind of think to yourself, which of these things do you already do, and which will you add after having these workshops? And I love that idea of the workshops for the parents. That's great. And I tell you, you can sometimes work with your family resource centers with
Yeah.
that, because they do a lot of parent, and Head Start is a wonderful group for
Yeah.
working
And
parents. So
when you have those Head Start and kindergarten, those parents will come to anything. I mean, they will
mhm.
come to the school. You get a lot of involvement when they're young, and when when the kids, I guess, allow them to come to school. But if they don't come to a workshop, like Vern said, you could go to their homes, but you already have to have a relationship with them, because you're not going to go to their home and say, okay, here's a box of cards I want you to use with your kid,
Because they're
but
going to come back and say, you're the teacher, I'm not the
yeah,
teacher.
yeah,
But when you let them know you're in it together, it's
yeah.
all in how you approach it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's embarrassing to some of them to say, I don't know how to do that, or
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is a really good idea. Okay. Here is the book. If anybody wants the book, it's cheap on Amazon. You can get it. And it will do a lot better job explaining everything that we talked about, better than we have. Um, okay, let's see. Let me see if we're going to talk about this today. Just a minute. I am going to skip this for right now. Okay. I'm going to go back here. Families in poverty by family structure. Married couple family, 5.4. Female headed household, no husband present, 28.2. Male headed household with no wife present. And those are the families in poverty by family structure. And you can,
And this is a survey from
Yeah.
2015 and 2016. And I would almost venture to say
that it's
that
way
may
higher
be
than that.
higher now.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't want to believe that, but
Mhm.
I would almost say it. I couldn't guarantee it, but
But you can probably guarantee it almost.
I can almost.
Uh,
And you look back at that though, what we were just looking at, and we do that boys in crisis, but you see right here that 28.2% of households have no husband present. Just the female is the top. So boys many times don't have someone as a model. Sometimes their people at school are the only people they have to model themselves by.
yeah,
So,
they need good role models.
uh-huh,
Yeah,
hmm absolutely.
that's why communication is so important in schools. Uh, and we've talked about students suspended from school compared to school a student population by race, sex, disability, status, school year. This is 13, 14, and that's been 10 years ago, so that's definitely has increased. And if you look at your suspension rates, or your in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, your office referrals, more than likely it's going to be boys. And we talked a lot about that in Boys in Crisis, why, because, why boys are suspended more or get in more trouble, have behaviors, have more office referrals. And one of the reasons why is that we talked about this, that we don't teach boys
differently.
We teach them the same way we do girls, and we know boys and girls learn differently. And so, we don't have a big diverse population as far as race, but we have poverty, and then we have diversity among poverty. So
And disabilities.
and
Students
disabilities,
with
that, yeah,
disabilities
I'm
and
glad you
without.
mentioned that, because I was going to say that. Yes, and you will see a lot of boys with disabilities are suspended a lot or have office referrals, and more than one, because I've seen those numbers, and it is true. So we have to, and I'm not sure why, and I think we had a district, Mary was talking about the other day, that were interested in some training on boys learning. But anyway,
They had looked at their data, and
yeah,
it was so obvious in their data that the boys um, were having more discipline problems, were not on as high level as many of the girls. It was so
yeah,
disproportionate that they felt like they needed some
yeah,
training in that,
and
and some strategies.
right, and
They were
I would
they
venture to
were
say that's
finding
all of them. Go ahead, Mary. I'm sorry.
Yep. They were finding that as the kids got older, the gap widened even more between the boys and the girls, like the percent
Yeah.
scoring proficient, distinguished, comparing the
Yes.
two groups. And
And I would say boys, the older they get, the more aware of, am I am I cool? Are they making fun of me? Am I, you know, how they look with their peers, you know.
Mhm.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I, I think too, they try to hide it even
Yeah.
more instead of asking questions, because they are embarrassed many times to ask questions. They
Hmm.
cover it up with uh, the class
Yeah.
clown or whatever.
What does this information mean in the school or work setting? Equity is not the same as equality. To treat students equitably, we need to take into account all of the factors that intersect to make each student's situation unique. And that's the whole big deal. It's a whole ball of wax. All the kids are different. Everybody has a unique situation. Yeah, they have some of the same characteristics or some of the same um, the same things going on in their families, but they're still different. So
Everybody, each kid brings its own story with it, and where it's been and what it's experienced. And we have to, as educators, get to know those kids and realize what it's going to take to help them, to get them to a point where it's equitable. Many people say, well, I want it to be equal for all. Well, it's not an equal world. Some people are smarter than me. If it were equal, we'd all have the same brains. It's not an equal world. So you have to look and find, what is it that you can do to help that student, or what's keeping that student from getting to where it needs to be. So you can have equality, absolutely, but to be equitable, you have to know your kids, and you have to provide them with the resources they need, whether it's a different type of instruction or whatever, to get
well,
there.
yeah, I mean, well, we always say I treat all kids, they all get the same. Well, if they do, that's not equal. That's equity. When you give every kid the same opportunity, but you don't take into account the differences in the kids, the the diversities. And Doug, he's done this little he used to do this presentation, he probably still does. He talks about the backpack, like Bernadette said, what kids bring with them to the classroom, who they bring with them to the classroom. If mom
Mhm.
and dad fought last night, or mom fought with her boyfriend, or dad fought with his girlfriend, that they are in that backpack. They're coming into the classroom. And when we go on deeper into emotional poverty, the other training that we do, we will talk about that and who's in your classroom. And also the teacher, she packs some people and some different situations with them when they come into classroom. They also have a backpack with all the things that are going on in their life. So when
there's a great video that I wish we could
oh
show.
gosh, yeah, let's show that
Because
next
it
time. We might show
well,
it
this
right
is our
now.
last time with this.
Oh,
I wish we had it handy, but it really shows us that not only are kids coming with all these things on their mind and all these things going on in their life, all this baggage, but also your teachers, your custodians. And sometimes when we work with our peers, somebody, you may think, well, what's wrong with them today? They're not being very friendly. They're not, but they may have something in there that you have no clue about. So we have to learn to give people grace.
oh, that was good, Bern.
Yeah.
We could send this video out to them and let them look at, let them
Okay.
look at it when
Okay.
they're thinking
We could
about
do
it.
that. It's a great video.
It is. And you don't realize what's in everybody's backpack. You just don't know it, just like you were talking.
Is that I think there's a song, everybody's going through something or
Yeah.
been through something, and that is
Mhm.
so true.
Building relationships and mutual respect with students and their parents will help you better understand how intersectionality affects their lives inside and out of the classroom. This is so true. And we've talked about that. Poverty in the brain, how poverty impacts brain development. Go ahead, Bern. I can't see a thing today.
So material deprivation. Okay, did you
I'm sorry,
go
go
on?
ahead. I didn't mean to.
We start out, they're deprived of the cognitive stimulation in the home because they don't have many times the same experience,
Books.
have the same books, educational opportunities. The language in that environment is different, and let's face it, many times the nutritional well, they're deprived of that many times because sometimes, and we hate to think this, but it's true. Sometimes the only meals that kids get, or the two good meals, is when they come to school. So, of course, that becomes a stressor. It's toxic. And, it's a stressor also for parents. So, parenting, the quality of behaviors and capacity. And then we have environmental toxins and lead, many, and I think it's a lot better than it used to be, but used to be like people would rent and that have lead. So they were exposed to lead in the paint and all kinds of things that were dangerous, tobacco smoke. And I'm not saying that, I mean, a lot of people do smoke, but a lot of people in poverty, they definitely smoke, and it will be, and here's the thing, they'll smoke in the house, they'll have two or three smoking, so that's hazardous. So you have all these biological mechanisms and it impacts the brain. The key structural and functional changes are the language and reading related areas, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex, which we talked about that in the very beginning. And this affects in the neurocognitive, the reading, language ability, and the executive functions. So many things they struggle with, especially reading, language, because a lot of times they're not hearing it. They're not hearing the hidden, the middle class language. And sometimes, they don't see it. They watch TV, but they don't have those experiences. And they, like Brother said earlier, sometimes books,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'm all for Head Start. I think it makes a big difference in kids' lives and especially their start in school. Therefore, hence Head Start. So I think that's, hey, Kim, go ahead. Kim's got her hand up. Please.
Yay.
Kim?
I
There.
was muted. You were talking about the parts of the brain, and
Mhm.
when you talk about the hippocampus, and this is something that I learned, I did a lot of reading about this because I really think this is true. But when you have somebody that's really, really stressed out, their hippocampus shrinks. So if you have that child, like you guys were talking about the thing with kids coming in with those backpacks, if that kid has not slept
Yeah.
or
I
not
was
slept
gonna say,
well
mhm.
and, screaming, hollering, and that kind of stuff, that hippocampus shrinks. Hippocampus is where you develop memory, is where you develop your attachment
Right.
to your learning. I mean, you can't do it if the hippocampus is like this big.
Mm-mm.
And and that's why a lot of those schools are doing those restorative practices, like they're
Mhm.
having like the
Yes.
stuff that you guys have been doing with schools, where you have the quiet room and that whole kind of thing, and doing all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
That's really good for kids. And then I saw a thing on Edutopia that there are elementary schools and middle schools that are having like yoga classes at the beginning of class.
Mhm.
Like, they start the day with yoga and that kind of thing. And I think that's great.
Oh, I am all for yoga. I mean, not me doing it, but I think that is a big stress reliever, yoga and the breathing techniques. And, I
I
think
used
that
to do
makes a
yoga
I think,
difference.
a lot. I used to do
did you,
yoga a lot.
Kim? Sometimes I think that we feel like, well, that's a waste of time. But if you take just a few minutes, the mindful strategies that Brana does also, if you're better off to take a little bit and do that with the students and for yourself, and you're not really wasting time, because I personally feel like you're going to gain by doing that, because they're going to be
Right.
ready to learn and be able to learn.
Absolutely. And Kim said something the other day. Yeah, that we have to we were in emotional poverty then, that we have to get that in place first. We have to look at that first before you can get the academics. Because,
Absolutely.
these kids are dealing with a lot, especially now. Um, it's a lot.
Maslow before Bloom.
Yeah, that's what you said.
That's it, Kim. Thank you.
Woo! I knew
She
it was
come with
something
it.
good, people. I knew it's something good. How poverty impacts brain development, and Kim was talking about that. As a group, children in poverty are more likely to experience developmental delay, perform worse on cognitive and achievement tests, experience more behavior and emotional problems than their more advantaged peers. And we have seen that, and we do know that. In addition, child socioeconomic status is tied to educational attainment, health, and psychological well-being decades later. And poverty may shape the brain at a molecular, neural, cognitive, and behavioral levels. See, poverty affects it all, from the brain to the body. What is it about poverty that impacts the development of the brain? In this medical model, 3 aspects of the environment are addressed, and I think Bernadette talked about them: material deprivation, stressors, and environmental toxins. And there are so many things that affect that for kids that live in generational poverty. They live in poor conditions, and we know that. They live in unsafe, and I'm not saying this with everybody. I'm not saying this as a disparagement, disparaging against generational poverty. I'm just saying what I've seen and how it is. Okay. If you don't have the materials that you need and you don't have the capacity to do it, you're not going to have a very sanitary home. You're not going to have a very clean home. And we're talking about parents that are deprived too. And so
And
they're
many
living in
times
this.
many times people rent to them, or they may have accumulated enough to get them a small place or whatever, but a lot of times the people that rent to them don't provide them with adequate facilities they charge them, and they're paying rent. But like I went years and years ago to a kid doing a home visit, and there literally was no floor when I stepped inside that house. And you thought there was because you stepped up to it, you went up on a porch, a small porch. And then when you stepped inside, you stepped down because there was no floor, and the mattresses were in there on that. So, which that house has been torn down since then, long ago, and thank God it was. But I'm sure that's not the only situation, and I know it's not because I've seen many others. So they are deprived,
Oh, yeah.
many times taken advantage of.
And we talked about this the other day in our emotional poverty one, which, it kind of all crosses over, but about we really have to go to the homes to see where these kids live. We have to do some home visits because that's going to give you a whole new perspective on the kids that you're teaching and why Tommy is sleeping all morning, Um, and not only do they have the material deprivation, but they have the cultural and the the stressors that the family structure and the family function causes. They're packing a lot of stuff with them. So uh I mean, just being able to know your kids and know their parents and have a relationship with them will make the biggest difference. It'll make the biggest difference in their lives. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about generational poverty. These parents of these kids that you have grew up the exact same way that their kids are growing up. Generational poverty it has been going on for a long time. And we do, which we're going to do a series on bridges out of poverty, which how do we get families, how do they break that cycle to get out of generational poverty? And it has been done. I mean, I have seen, and people will tell their story. And a lot of the poverty, it might be situational poverty, but to break out of a generational poverty cycle it's really hard, but it can be done. Okay. Kim, you want to say anything? Mary?
In the
Shelley?
chat, Shelly,
Well, the only
in
thing,
the chat, Shelly, you can
Go ahead,
sorry.
Shelley. I think. Okay. I can
Well,
hear you,
she can
Shelley.
finish. She could fit. Yeah, I can read what I had said in the chat. Like we can definitely easily tell, and especially like the closer that you get to your students. And we've had a bed bug found the other day, and I couldn't even imagine living in those situations to where it's that bad that you're bringing them to school. And it really just takes all of the effort from teachers and that extra empathy and all of the resources that we have available. And especially for the seniors, I know that college is super important, but then some of these children, they just aren't going to cut it in college, but they could go to VOTEC. Like we have the most amazing VOTEC
Absolutely.
program here, and it's free mostly, and it's something that they could achieve and make really good money in a less amount of time. And so it's really important just to notice, when your students are more adequate for that type of situation, and that could actually get them out of the poverty more than college or something else. And just the teacher influence is the most important thing, I think, and the social workers and counselors at school to break that chain for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree. And, it goes back to helping them to develop that plan. Okay, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? And this is how you have to get there.
Yeah, that future
Begin with the end
story.
in mind. What do
Yeah.
you want your future story to be? And you're right. Teachers have to help guide them to get there because many times they don't know, but we have to provide them with the resources and help them to see what they can do and how they can do it.
And that
We can't
comes
make
down
the
to
decision for them, but we guide them there.
I think that too comes down to the relationship a kid has. They need. I think one of the trainers that we had in this said not just one but two people that are champions for the kids in your school. Doesn't have to be a teacher, but that's going to be a top champion and or a lot of them. But it might be the custodian, it might be the cook, it could be anybody in the school. And, and I think that's one thing we need to teach our kids, that you're going to have a career. It may not, uh, uh, it, it may not require college. It may require career tech. Even kids who are not living in poverty, they might want to go that route. You have to look at the kids, and and some of the kids that are living in generational poverty can go to college. Um, it just, it's just what we have to do. I don't know why I said that though. Nutritional deficiencies. Oh, can't talk today. Rural areas faced with food insecurity, and then the metropolitan areas. You can see the difference, and I'm guessing it's probably higher. And I think, I don't know who was talking about this, but we talk about the Dollar General store, how you can go in, you get snacks, and you get all this, and now they have milk and food, and now they have fruit and vegetables.
Some do,
Some do, not
some
all
do.
of them. Some do, not all of them. But I think a part of that was because they were hitting all these rural areas with not such good food choices. And so, Kim, do you know she probably knows
Well,
actually about that.
well, no, but actually, did some reading about this, because where I'm doing that rural, what is it, the rural experience, with the NCHE. So we've actually had discussions about that, and the fact that, and one thing that the dollar store has capitalized on, which is genius, is that because, and I can't explain this in 2 minutes, and I won't, but how their whole economic model is set up, that they target areas that are lower socioeconomic. That's why you'll go into a county and you may have 6 or even 8 in a county that you're like, there's no money here, but for some reason, because those stores, they have the economic capital, they can move in like that, and they can, it's like a fungus. Okay. So it's an economic fungus. But here's the kicker, is what they have noticed, and this started happening. They experimented in some other markets, but now you guys are going to notice is that now they're having DG markets. So it's dollar store, it's Dollar General markets. So many of their stores now are converting to a market model, because they have found all of this information, and it's coming from the census too, by the way. The census
info. Good.
Yeah, I'm going to plug in that census. That's my next goal in life. Is I'm just going to go around, harassing people about taking the census. I'm going to just drive up hollers randomly. I say, you need to fill this out. But anyway, no, I'm not.
You'll leave with a little lead, a little extra.
Yeah, just a little extra. But all kidding, but all kidding aside, well, I don't blame them. But anyway, all kidding aside, though, they have gone into the census. If you guys will notice, in the 2020, we didn't have that as much, if any at all. Then all of a sudden, 2024, you're seeing the DG markets. And so now that is going to absolutely explode. And when that happens, because you're seeing them in communities that either have and we know districts, I mean, not districts, but we know counties where there is no longer, because supposedly there is a really large, food city or whatever over the county line. But Dollar General is like, no, it's about convenience and price. So they're bringing it to the people, and their profits. I'll put it this way: I may buy some DG stock. I'm just saying.
I think we should. You're exactly
we
right.
I think in our county, which is a small county. How many Dollar Generals do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4,
5.
Five that I can think of.
Yeah,
and they're in the more rural. Well, 2 of them are in town, but they're in the more rural part of the counties.
And see, notice you said 2 are in town. Your all's town's big, but it's not that big.
No,
and you have 2 in town. But once I cross my county line, I pass, just getting to my house, I pass 3, and then there's 1 that is less than a quarter mile from my house.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I was just
I will
say,
visit a Dollar General.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, this is something I worry about, especially now that I'm working with Success Academy, because I can definitely tell, like, our seniors that wait for breakfast on Monday morning. And, I had said, I want to get you a little something, I'm so proud of you for graduating. because he's put so much effort into it. And he said, well, I just want some orange pop and Doritos and Snickers so I won't be hungry this summer. And that's so heartbreaking. And if,
Oh,
yeah, and if they have, so I mean, I wanted to try to do more than that, but there's no way I could, give him possibly enough food for this summer. But if they don't have a way to, get to the sites where the food is located, like at the schools, or, when I lived in Ohio County, they kind of had a van that went to certain locations. I don't know if they do that here in Perry County. But if they're too far out for that, they really don't have any resources to get the food. And so I think that's something, that really we need to work on, as well as some type of follow-up program, like for people that do graduate, and say, hey, are you enrolled in a technical school, or are you enrolled in college? And even coming back a year or two later and checking on them, and just making sure they didn't give up hope, and kind of taking it a little bit further if possible. So
So Shelly, one more time for the census. Here I go. Okay. But this is real. This is legit. This is why we, more than any other area in the world, if you ask me, this is why we have to tell our people, because people think that when you fill out the census, that what you're doing is you're telling the government how much you make, you're telling the government where you are. Yet no one, and I can show you the law, and it's even in the Constitution, no other government agency is allowed to access the census report. No one. The information that we get from the census is processed by the United States Census, and the information is revealed in terms of charts and graphs and like numbers. It is not specific people or anything. So we have absolutely got to tell them, because the reason why your kids don't have access to those things. And the other thing is, if we have more people report and they're lower socioeconomic, then guess what we get because of that? We get more clinics, we get more social services, because they say, look, we have tax dollars and our tax dollars need to go here. So that's all the census does, is it identifies deficiencies, but people will not fill it out. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's the reason why we're seeing clinics, even hospitals, 911s, the emergency, services. That's why we're seeing them close down in places all around our region, is because the census basically is not accounting for anywhere from 500 to 2,000 people per county. So once you get to below a certain level in terms of your population, the United States government has a formula, and they look up and go, oh, only 10,000 people live in this county, when in reality 14,000 do, or even 18,000. And then they say, oh, this
so
is
you
all
don't
that
have
we'll
the
allow them to have.
services.
You do not have the services. So again, thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk.
Couple of comments in the chat.
A
couple of comments. Yeah, in the chat. Andrea said, I had a student the other day mention they had bed bugs and just treated it like it was no big deal. He had bites on his hands. And she also mentioned that Gateway offers a lot of financial aid to students post high school. And then Shelley mentioned we need census education. Definitely.
Yeah. Kids, go home, get your parents to fill out the census, and we will give you a prize. I mean, seriously, you could do that.
Yes.
You wouldn't believe.
But Adrian, you did the right thing with that, because it's so embarrassing to a kid if you make a big deal out of something. Whatever you do, you kind of handle it in that way and not make a big deal out of it, because they know that other kids don't have bad bugs.
Do we still have the summer lunch program, or is that just for COVID?
We do here.
We do. Yeah.
I think in this area, I think it's however that your district has it set up. And I do know that here in McGoffin County, they have a couple of little small vans and also buses take it to certain areas and sit and wait on them to come, which I see your point also, because what if they can't come to that area? I mean, it's closer, but it's still not. It may still be impossible for them to get there, So I think they try to pick out the place that they go to different spots and have certain times to be there, and try to pick out the place where it's easier for people to access, I guess.
Yeah, where the most kids are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they still have this, or they still have the backpack program.
We used to work through what is that called down there? The Cooperative Extension. I don't know they have that or not, but they used to work with us on the backpack program, and I think they still do here in this county, because my church every so often will bring in things that our kids can open on their own, that they can have easy access to, so they'll have something to eat when they're home. So I believe they still do here, because we just took up a donation here the other day.
But I love, I know special ed, they have that, it's the yo-yo. It's like year one, youth one, year out youth. But anyway, and it's a year after they graduate, you call and, do an interview with them on what they're doing. And I've done that before as special ed director, and it's pretty interesting to see. Some of them are not doing anything, and some of them are actually working, But I'm with Shelley or Adrian, whichever one said it. I think we need to do it with all of our kids, and maybe sooner than a year.
And
Couple more
Adrian,
things. Sorry.
Adrian had, okay, go ahead, Mary. I'll let you. I
In the
was going to
chat.
say, I'm
Okay,
trying to
Mary.
be quiet, Mary. I
Wait
can't
just a minute.
hardly.
Let me look at her.
I was going to just say what was put in the chat. They need healthy meal recipes too. Adrian says another workshop idea. Laugh out loud. And then Shelley said, I think that's why the poorest kids get left out, because they are the furthest out in the hall or mostly alone. And the time is 4:35.
Okay, and I just want to say one thing on this healthy meal recipes. I don't know if they still do it, but Cooperative Extension, and that's been many years ago. It's when I was a principal, but we had an evening thing for parents and students, and we provided all, along with the Cooperative Extension, all of the food, so they could prepare the food. I guess we supplied the supplies or whatever. It's not sounding right, but anyway, parents and students were instructed by someone from Cooperative Extension how to make these healthy meals, and they actually prepared them there and were able to eat them there. So it was a very neat experience, and I like I said, I don't know if they still do it, but that's an idea. Yeah, it was kind of like a cooking class. It was fun. So thank you guys for joining. Be sure and complete the feedback, and when you do that, you will get your credit automatically, your ELA certificate. Bronna, are we going to do another session, or is
No,
this
I think what I will do is on these last few slides, I will just copy them and send them to you guys, because we only have a few left, and we'll just wrap this up. And it's been really good, and I've enjoyed it a lot.
I have too, and really these slides that are left are just kind of a review of everything that we've kind of gone over throughout the session. So we appreciate you for joining. It's great to hear your ideas. And Shelley has something in the chat. I think these stresses are definitely what causes fibromyalgia and autoimmune disorder. I agree with you. I think stress can literally make you sick. I know it can.
Well, they say stress can kill you.
Yeah,
it can. Stress will kill you. Thank you all for your feedback, and we appreciate you, and have a good evening.
bye, girls.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Is there no
Thank you.
sign-in sheet? I had kind of lost connection 2 or 3 times, and I don't know that I didn't lose it, or is it just the sign-out sheet?
It's just
a
a sign out.
When you complete this feedback, then that lets us know that you were present, and it gives you your certificate to show that you were there. So be sure to complete that.
Okay, thank you. I had to log in and out
Thank
twice.
you.
So
I understand, honey. That's not a problem. Thank you so much.
You.